I couldn't sleep that night. An unsettling restlessness clawed at the edges of my mind. The kind of unease that whispers you're not alone even when you're staring into the abyss of an empty room. With a sigh, I dragged myself out of bed, the floor cold beneath my feet, and shuffled toward the bathroom. It was just supposed to be a quick trip, a splash of water to shake off the creeping dread. But when I looked at the mirror, my heart nearly stopped. The face staring back at me wasn't mine. Not exactly. At first, I thought it was some sick trick of the dim lighting. But as I leaned closer, the features twisted, morphing into something unrecognizable. My nose lengthened and then shrank. My jawline curved in impossible ways, and my eyes stretched wide as if they were swallowing the rest of my face. It wasn't just wrong, it was alive. I froze, staring at this grotesque mockery of myself, unable to look away. My heart pounded in my chest like it was trying to escape. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to run, but I was rooted in place. The figure in the mirror seemed to mock me, shifting and writhing like it was trying to climb out. When I finally tore my gaze away, I staggered back to my bedroom, every step feeling like wading through quicksand. But the unease followed me, crawling under my skin. Something compelled me to check again, this time in the full-length mirror by the closet. I told myself it would be different, that I'd see my normal reflection and laugh this off as a hallucination born of exhaustion. I was wrong. As soon as I stood before the glass, the distortion began again. My face warped like molten wax, sagging and stretching in unnatural ways. I blinked hard, hoping to clear whatever fog was clouding my vision. For a moment, my reflection was normal. But only for a moment. Then it twisted again, and this time, I thought I saw something behind me, just out of frame. I couldn't take it anymore. I dove into bed, pulling the covers over my head like a child, trying to hide from monsters. But even with my eyes shut tight, I could still feel it, that thing in the mirror, watching me, mocking me, waiting for me to look again. Sleep didn't come easy that night. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were filled with grotesque, shifting faces that melted and reformed over and over, each one more horrifying than the last. I woke up drenched in sweat, the taste of fear bitter on my tongue. The scariest part? This wasn't the first time. A few months ago, back in September, something eerily similar happened. I was sitting in the back seat of my mom's car, staring absent-mindedly into the rearview mirror. It was a normal day, nothing out of the ordinary. Until it wasn't. I glanced at my reflection, and it wasn't me. The face staring back was wrong, like a stranger had taken my place. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the angle or the glass, but deep down, I knew better. The longer I stared, the more my brain rebelled against what I was seeing. It didn't help that the face began to resemble my younger brother's, a twisted, uncanny version of his 14-year-old self. I'm 17, and our features aren't that similar, so seeing his face where mine should have been sent a chill down my spine. I didn't say anything at the time. What could I say? That my reflection had been hijacked by some doppelganger masquerading as my sibling? Instead, I sat there in stunned silence, willing my reflection to return to normal. It did, eventually, but those few seconds stretched into an eternity of sheer terror. My mind kept looping back to it, obsessing over the impossibility of what I'd seen. At least the episode had been brief, a fleeting glitch in an otherwise ordinary day. This latest incident, though, it was something else entirely. It lingered, burrowing into my thoughts like a parasite. And the worst part was the growing suspicion that these weren't isolated events. That whatever was happening to me wasn't done. I've always felt like there was something off about mirrors. Like they were more than just reflections. Maybe they're windows. Maybe they're doors. And maybe, just maybe, something on the other side is watching, waiting for the right moment to step through. I didn't talk about it the next morning. Not with my mom, not with my friends, not even with myself. It felt like acknowledging it out loud would make it too real, like it would somehow summon whatever it was back into my life. But the unease didn't go away. Every time I passed a reflective surface, I felt it, a tug at the corner of my mind, urging me to look, daring me to confront the thing lurking in the glass. I started avoiding mirrors altogether. I brushed my teeth without looking up. I kept my head down when I passed shop windows. Even my phone's front-facing camera became a source of anxiety. But the more I tried to escape it, the more it seemed to follow me. One night, as I lay in bed scrolling mindlessly through my phone, the screen went dark for a moment. Just a flicker. But in that split second, I saw a face staring back at me. Not my face. It was pale, almost translucent, with hollow eyes that seemed to peer straight through me. My breath hitched, and I nearly dropped the phone. When the screen came back on, everything was normal. But my heart was racing, and a cold sweat clung to my skin. I set the phone down and forced myself to take slow, deep breaths. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself. "You're just imagining things." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and exhaustion. Every shadow felt like it was watching me. Every reflective surface felt like a trap. I started sleeping with the lights on, but even that didn't help. The dreams were the worst part. They were vivid and suffocating, filled with mirrors that seemed to stretch on forever, each one holding a version of me that wasn't quite right. Some were grotesque, others eerily perfect, but all of them were wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. I woke up one morning with dark circles under my eyes and a gnawing sense of dread in my chest. Something had to give. I couldn't keep living like this, teetering on the edge of my sanity. I needed answers, or at least some way to make it stop. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the library. The place was nearly empty, the kind of quiet that felt oppressive rather than peaceful. I wandered the aisles aimlessly at first, unsure of what I was even looking for. Ghost stories? Psychology? Demonology? I finally settled on a dusty section labeled Occult Studies. It felt ridiculous, like something out of a bad horror movie, but I was desperate. The books were old and smelled like mildew, their titles embossed in fading gold letters. I pulled one at random, flipping through pages filled with dense, arcane text. Most of it was incomprehensible, but one passage caught my eye. The mirror is a portal, a liminal space where reality and illusion blur. To gaze too long is to invite the unknown to gaze back. My breath hitched as I read the words again. A portal. A door. It made too much sense. I thought back to all the times my reflection had warped and shifted, the way it seemed alive, aware. What if it wasn't just my imagination? What if something really was looking back at me? I spent hours in that corner of the library, poring over books and scribbling frantic notes. Most of it was vague, cryptic nonsense, but a few pieces stood out. The idea that mirrors could act as gateways was a recurring theme, and there were even mentions of rituals to close them. One in particular caught my attention. It was simple enough. A circle of salt, a black candle, and an incantation to sever the connection between worlds. It sounded absurd, but as I sat there in the dim light of the library, surrounded by the weight of ancient knowledge, I felt a sliver of hope. Absurd or not, it was something, and something was better than nothing. The walk home from the library felt heavier than usual. The shadows seemed to stretch farther, the faint glimmers of reflected streetlights and puddles almost taunting me. Clutching the book to my chest, I hurried through the quiet streets, every creak and rustle amplifying my already frayed nerves. Once home, I wasted no time. I locked the door, bolted the windows, and set up in the middle of the living room. It felt silly at first, like some kind of adolescent experiment with a Ouija board. But as I drew the circle of salt on the floor, the air in the room seemed to shift. It grew heavier, colder, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I placed the black candle at the center of the circle and lit it. The flame flickered weakly, casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. I unfolded the piece of paper with the incantation and read it aloud. my voice unsteady at first but gaining strength with each word. Through this flame, I sever the ties. By this salt, I close the way. No shadow may cross, no gaze may linger. What is mine is mine, what is yours is yours. The mirror is shut. The door is closed. The moment the last word left my lips, the flame shot up, bright and wild, before extinguishing itself entirely. The room plunged into darkness, the silence so thick it felt like a physical presence. My heart pounded as I strained to hear anything. Then, a sound, a faint, almost imperceptible scratching, like nails on glass. My eyes darted to the hallway mirror. The surface was rippling, the glass bending and warping as if it were liquid. And there, emerging from the distortion, was a hand. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. The hand was pale and thin, the fingers impossibly long, stretching and curling as they pushed through the barrier. Then came the face, the same hollow-eyed visage that had haunted my dreams. It wasn't just watching now, it was coming for me. Desperation overtook fear. I grabbed the book and frantically flipped to the section on breaking mirror portals. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read. But one phrase stood out: shatter the glass, sever the link. Without thinking, I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a cast-iron candle holder, and hurled it at the mirror. The glass exploded, shards flying in all directions. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched screech that seemed to reverberate inside my skull. When the noise finally died down, the room was still. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight lifted. But it wasn't over. The shards of the mirror scattered across the floor began to shimmer, their surfaces reflecting not the room but something else. A void, endless and dark, filled with countless shifting faces, all staring back at me. One by one, the faces began to fade, their features dissolving into the blackness until only my own reflection remained in each fragment. Normal. Ordinary. Me. I collapsed onto the floor, my body trembling with exhaustion and relief. For the first time in weeks, the air around me felt quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't watching, wasn't waiting. I swept up the shards and threw them away, careful not to look too closely at their surfaces. Then, I packed the book back into my bag and returned it to the library the next day, sliding it onto the shelf without a second glance. The mirrors in my house are gone now. Every single one. I brush my teeth by feel, do my hair without seeing it. People think it's strange, but I don't care. I've learned my lesson. Some things are better left unseen. But every so often, when I catch my reflection in a window or a polished surface, I swear I see it. Just for a second. A flicker of movement that doesn't belong. And I wonder, did I close the door completely, or did I just leave it open a crack?